Imagine this. Everything you think you know about human history is only the glittering tip of a gigantic iceberg. Beneath the surface, hidden in darkness, lie traces of civilizations that science agrees once existed, yet still cannot place on a clean, simple timeline. These are cultures we can neither fully describe nor comfortably deny, and they are about to challenge the story you thought was settled. For most of modern education, human history is presented like a straight road. We start with simple hunter-gatherers, move slowly into farming villages, then cities, then empires, then eventually the scientific and digital age. The dates might shift as new discoveries appear, but the shape of the story seems reassuringly linear, always climbing upward from primitive to advanced. But when archaeologists, geologists, and geneticists look closely at the ground, the rocks, and even the DNA inside our cells, they do not see a neat staircase. They see gaps, sudden jumps, unexplained collapses, and above all, anomalies. Sites, artifacts, and traces of knowledge that appear too early, too sophisticated, or too isolated to fit the official script. That is where the idea of a lost civilization truly begins. It is not just about a ruined city swallowed by jungle or a temple half broken by earthquakes. A lost civilization, in the way many researchers quietly use the term today, means a complete system of life that has been almost erased. Social structures, belief systems, symbolic language, engineering skills, and worldviews that once shaped human experience now surviving only as fragments. Sometimes those fragments are blocks of stone, cut and aligned with a precision our ancestors were supposedly not able to achieve. Sometimes they are underwater walls and avenues lying far below modern sea level. Sometimes they are symbols carved onto rock in patterns that do not match any known writing system. Sometimes they show up inside us as unusual clusters of genes that hint at entire populations no history book mentions. Science is built on caution, so most of these clues are filed under labels like unusual, controversial, or inconclusive. Yet taken together, they sketch the outline of something both simple and unsettling. Our species may have built organized, complex cultures long before we currently admit, and many of those cultures may have fallen so completely that we barely remember they were here at all. There is another layer to the problem. Archaeology is painfully fragile. The vast majority of everything humans ever made has already been destroyed by water, erosion, earthquakes, volcanic ash, bacteria, and time. Wood rots, cloth vanishes, mud brick dissolves, even stone crumbles. What survives to be found by a dig team in the 21st century is not the full archive of the human story. It is a handful of scorched pages from a library burned again and again. That means our timeline is being reconstructed from less than 1% of 1% of the evidence. Under those conditions, even a small number of out-of-place discoveries carries a huge weight. A city where there should be no city, a structure deeper than the estimated age of major civilizations, a network of tunnels too large for a simple tribal shelter, a script that nobody alive can read. Each one is a whisper from a chapter that has been ripped out. In public, research institutions often emphasize what we know. In private, many scientists admit that what we do not know may be far larger. The pattern that emerges from the oceans, the caves, the deserts, and the DNA databases is not comforting. It suggests that humanity's story is not a straight line, but a cycle. Rise, flourish, collapse, forget, and then begin again on the ruins of something barely remembered. In this first chapter, we will pull the camera back and look at that entire pattern. We will not claim that a single global supercivilization once ruled the planet, nor that every myth is literal truth. Instead, we will ask a more careful but equally radical question. How many times might organized, complex civilizations have appeared and disappeared before the slice of history we call recorded time even began? To explore that question, the rest of this documentary will travel into the three-dimensional map of our forgotten past, under the seas, into the bedrock, across the ruins of ghost cities, through undeciphered scripts, and finally into the code of life itself. Piece by piece, we will follow the trails that science has not yet been able to connect. As we move deeper into this investigation, keep one idea in mind. Lack of explanation is not lack of reality. The ocean does not stop being deep just because our light cannot reach the bottom. Lost civilizations, in the strict scientific sense, may never be proven to the satisfaction of every skeptic. Yet the scattered signals they leave behind continue to tug at the edges of our models, asking us to widen them. This chapter is your invitation to do exactly that, to hold on to evidence, to let go of certainty, and to walk into prehistory with questions that are finally big enough. If the idea of lost civilizations challenges our understanding, then the first step is to examine why so many pieces of humanity's past seem deliberately obscured by nature, time, or both. Science often assumes continuity, but the historical record behaves more like a series of disconnected islands. What survives does not form a smooth coastline. Instead, it appears as scattered peaks of former continents, barely rising above an ocean of vanished evidence. One of the core reasons for this fragmentation lies in geological processes. Earth is not a static archive, but a restless machine. Continents drift, mountains rise, plains sink, shorelines drown. Civilizations that once stood on firm ground may now lie under hundreds of meters of sediment or deep beneath the sea. And because the oldest human cultures lived during periods of dramatic climatic instability, their traces were the first to be erased. Floods, glacial meltwater pulses, and rising seas did more than reshape coastlines. They swallowed entire chapters of human experience. But building a civilization is more than constructing buildings. It requires symbols, rituals, shared stories. And when those stories are broken, when written records vanish, when scripts cannot be read, the people behind them become shadows. This is why many scholars argue that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is a sign that our search has only skimmed the surface. Archaeology tends to illuminate societies that left behind stone, metal, or fire-hardened materials. Yet most early human achievements were crafted from wood, fiber, leather, or clay, materials that vanish without a trace. If a culture mastered trade, astronomy, navigation, or social governance but built with organic materials, we might never detect their existence. This is the quiet bias within our interpretation of the past. We mistake the durability of materials for the importance of cultures. In recent years, a growing number of discoveries have pushed against the linear model of human development. Ancient structures with astronomical alignments too precise for supposedly simple societies. Underground networks more elaborate than tribal groups would ever need. Tools and artifacts found in layers older than their technology should allow. These anomalies may be isolated, but collectively they suggest a broader pattern. Human civilization has a deeper, more complex foundation than our textbooks reveal. Another challenge emerges from the selective nature of survival. What remains of an ancient culture may not reflect its height, but only what happened to endure. A single stone ring may outlast an entire coastal city. A few carvings may outlast a library. A collapsed tunnel may outlast a thriving marketplace. Our view is shaped not by what once existed, but by what time accidentally spared. To understand lost civilizations, we must accept that our map of the past is incomplete. It is a jigsaw puzzle missing most of its pieces, with many surviving fragments belonging to pictures we have not yet identified. In this part, we examine why the past resists reconstruction, not because humans were simple, but because reality was too complex to preserve neatly. Before we can search for the lost, we must understand how easily they could disappear, and how their echoes still reach us through the ruins, symbols, and mysteries they left behind. This difficulty is amplified by the uneven attention given to different regions. Some landscapes are explored exhaustively, while others remain untouched because of political barriers, dense forests, shifting sands, or deep water. It is entirely possible that the greatest clues to humanity's forgotten epochs lie in places we have never dug, scanned, or dived. Every year, LiDAR surveys, satellite imagery, and seismic mapping reveal unexpected structures in regions thought empty. Each revelation reminds us that our blindness is not due to lack of evidence, but lack of reach. Even more revealing is the way cultures reinterpret what came before them. Successive societies often repurpose, rebuild, or erase earlier structures, layering their own beliefs on top of forgotten foundations. Temples become fortresses. Fortresses become shrines. Shrines become ruins. By the time archaeologists arrive, the site may contain the fingerprints of dozens of cultures, all overlapping in confusing patterns. Thus, when we speak of lost civilizations, we are not invoking fantasy. We are acknowledging that humanity has lived through cycles of creation and destruction far older than written history. And the deeper we look, the more the ground beneath our assumptions begins to shift. These realities force us to rethink what we consider possible in prehistory. Instead of assuming that complexity emerges late, we must consider that complexity may have emerged early, vanished, and re-emerged. Civilizations may have risen in places now unreachable, leaving behind only the fragments sturdy enough to resist oblivion. In this light, anomalies are not exceptions, they are survivors. This perspective changes our approach. Instead of asking why evidence is scarce, we ask how any evidence survived at all. And once we make that shift, the presence of unexplained ruins becomes not a puzzle to dismiss, but an invitation to rediscover a chapter of humanity waiting just beyond the edge of what science can currently explain. Beneath the surfaces of oceans, lakes, and ancient shorelines lie some of the most provocative clues suggesting that human civilization may have a much deeper history than we currently acknowledge. The world after the last ice age experienced dramatic rises in sea level, submerging vast stretches of land where early cultures likely lived. If cities, harbors, ceremonial sites, or sophisticated settlements once stood along those prehistoric coasts, they would now rest hundreds of feet underwater, unreachable until modern technology made their detection possible. Divers, sonar technicians, and marine archaeologists have uncovered structures that appear engineered: right angles, terraces, long corridors, and cut stone blocks arranged in ways unlikely to occur naturally. These underwater anomalies stretch from the coasts of India to Japan, from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, from Britain to South America. Some sites show layouts resembling urban planning: broad avenues, elevated platforms, and large foundation stones suggestive of communal spaces or ritual centers. Such features challenge the belief that early post-glacial societies lacked the organization required to build complex settlements. The most striking element is not the existence of submerged ruins, but their apparent age. Many underwater formations seem older than the earliest known cities by several thousand years. If they are indeed artificial, they point to cultures capable of coordinated design long before the conventional timeline allows. Scientists debate these interpretations, but even conservative analyses admit that sea level rise alone cannot explain every pattern found beneath the waves. The question of who built these structures remains unanswered. Some propose late Stone Age communities experimenting with permanent architecture. Others suggest independent development by coastal groups whose identities vanished as rising seas erased their landscapes. Without inscriptions, tools, or preserved organic materials, researchers are left with forms, shapes carved into stone, patterns aligned to cardinal directions, and geometric arrangements reminiscent of early ceremonial centers. What complicates matters further is that these submerged features often match patterns found on land. Megalithic alignments, circular enclosures, and polygonal masonry similar to those discovered across continents. This raises the possibility that coastal cultures shared symbolic languages or architectural ideas now lost to erosion and submersion. Whether this represents coincidence, diffusion, or a deeper connection, science has yet to decide. Because underwater archaeology is still limited by technology, only a fraction of the global seafloor has been surveyed in detail. The most promising areas, continental shelves where prehistoric coastlines once stretched, remain largely unexplored. Every new discovery forces scholars to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Our understanding of ancient human capability is based only on what remained above water, while the most important evidence may lie hidden beneath the waves. Equally compelling is the distribution of these sites. They are not isolated occurrences but appear in clusters along drowned continental margins. This pattern indicates that ancient peoples were drawn to coastlines for trade, food, and communication, just as modern societies are. If they built large settlements near the shore, then rising seas would have erased the majority of their infrastructure. The lack of surviving artifacts, therefore, may be a natural consequence of where early humans chose to live. Some researchers have proposed that these submerged structures represent proto-urban experiments, early attempts to organize space in ways that predate traditional city models. Others suggest that they were ritual landscapes, places where communities gathered for astronomical observation or seasonal ceremonies. The presence of possible stairways, platforms, and stone rings supports both interpretations, yet evidence remains ambiguous. The challenge lies not in proving that humans built these formations, but in determining their age with precision. Traditional dating methods rely on organic material, which is rarely preserved underwater. As a result, scholars must infer chronology from geological context, sediment layers, and comparative architectural analysis. These indirect methods leave wide margins of error, fueling debate while preventing consensus. Still, the sheer number of submerged formations suggests deliberate human activity. Their geometry, repetition, and spatial arrangement imply intention, even if their builders remain anonymous. If future technologies allow deeper excavation and more refined mapping, we may eventually confirm that entire civilizations once flourished on lands now claimed by the sea. Submerged ruins raise a deeper question. What kinds of societies thrived along prehistoric coasts before rising waters erased them? To approach this, we must imagine a world shaped by shifting climate zones, migrating populations, and coastlines that stretched far beyond today's boundaries. During the last ice age, sea levels were more than 100 meters lower, exposing vast plains where rivers met the ocean. These fertile areas would have been prime locations for early settlements, trade hubs, and ritual centers. As temperatures rose and glaciers melted, these landscapes disappeared beneath rising seas. The people who once lived there may have fled inland, leaving behind structures too heavy or too sacred to move. Without written records or durable artifacts, the identities of these coastal cultures dissolved. What remains are fragments of stone architecture that defy simple categorization, preserved only because they sank quickly rather than eroding on land. The disappearance of these societies highlights an important truth. The archaeological record is biased toward sites that survived by accident. Coastal settlements, which likely played a crucial role in early human development, faced the greatest risk of destruction. Waves, storms, and sediment buried their remains beneath layers impossible to excavate without advanced underwater tools. Another challenge lies in interpreting the purpose of submerged structures. Some formations resemble harbors or breakwaters, suggesting maritime trade long before the accepted origins of seafaring technology. Others appear to be ceremonial platforms, oriented toward astronomical events. If these interpretations are accurate, prehistoric humans may have possessed more sophisticated navigation, engineering, and cosmological understanding than previously believed. Modern researchers face methodological obstacles. Mapping underwater ruins requires high-resolution sonar, remotely operated vehicles, and divers trained for deep exploration. These technologies are expensive and limited by weather, visibility, and ocean currents. As a result, many known sites remain only partially documented, offering tantalizing glimpses rather than complete pictures. Yet even with incomplete data, certain patterns emerge. Submerged ruins often show consistent alignments with cardinal directions or celestial markers. Their construction frequently involves large stone blocks fitted with surprising precision. These traits mirror those found at terrestrial megalithic sites, hinting that the same architectural traditions or symbolic languages spanned both land and sea. Some scholars argue that this resemblance implies cultural continuity, while others propose independent innovation driven by universal human tendencies. Regardless of interpretation, the parallels deepen the mystery. How could dispersed prehistoric groups develop such similar techniques without long-distance communication? One possibility is that coastal networks facilitated contact across regions now submerged. Before sea levels rose, shorelines connected continents, enabling travel and trade across shorter distances than today. If ancient mariners sailed between these coastal centers, ideas and styles could have spread widely, only to be forgotten when the sea reclaimed the routes. The loss of these maritime highways reshaped human history. Communities that once thrived through coastal exchange may have become isolated, forcing them to rebuild knowledge from fragments. This could explain the sudden appearance and disappearance of technological leaps in the archaeological record. Understanding submerged civilizations requires acknowledging that much of humanity's story is missing. What we see today are the remnants that water could not destroy. As technology improves, future generations may uncover evidence that rewrites the timeline once again, revealing cultures that mastered engineering, astronomy, and navigation long before the known cradle of civilization. In this part, we confront the ocean not as a barrier, but as an archive, a vast, hidden library where drowned histories await rediscovery. The challenge is not merely to locate ruins, but to interpret them without imposing modern assumptions. Beneath the waves lies a world that may transform our view of human origins, urging us to continue searching for the civilizations erased by rising tides. This perspective also forces us to rethink the nature of cultural loss. When an inland society collapses, its ruins often remain accessible for millennia. But when a coastal civilization disappears underwater, its memory vanishes almost instantly. Oral traditions fade within generations, and without monuments to anchor cultural identity, entire peoples slip from history. The ocean becomes both a grave and a guardian, preserving stone while erasing context. Future exploration will depend on interdisciplinary collaboration, oceanographers to map seafloors, archaeologists to interpret structures, geneticists to trace migration patterns, and engineers to design submersible technologies capable of sustained deep-water study. These efforts may reveal that the foundations of civilization lie not on familiar land, but in forgotten coastlines now drowned by time. Beneath the surface of the earth lies a world as enigmatic as the oceans. Vast tunnel networks, multi-level underground cities, chambers carved with precision, and passages stretching far beyond what simple survival needs would ever require. These subterranean systems challenge the idea that early humans lived only on open landscapes or in temporary shelters. Instead, they point to deliberate engineering, logistical planning, and collective effort, traits associated with organized societies rather than small migratory groups. The most perplexing aspect of underground complexes is their scale. Some extend for kilometers, linking chambers through narrow corridors that twist through bedrock. Others span multiple levels, with ventilation shafts, storage rooms, water channels, and spaces that appear designed for long-term habitation. These features exceed the requirements of temporary refuge from predators or weather. They suggest sustained occupation, consistent architecture, and shared purpose. Archaeologists debate whether these systems were created during times of conflict, environmental stress, or ritual practice. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the uniformity and complexity of construction. Carving stone is labor-intensive and requires both tools and coordination. Maintaining multi-level structures demands planning far beyond basic daily needs. If these underground spaces were meant only for emergencies, why invest such immense effort into shaping them? Another mystery lies in the absence of clear written records or symbolic inscriptions explaining the intent behind these structures. While some sites contain markings, they rarely form cohesive narratives. Instead, researchers must infer purpose from architectural cues, the placement of rooms, the size of corridors, and the distribution of ventilation shafts. These clues imply that underground life was not purely functional, but followed specific patterns, possibly reflecting social hierarchy or ceremonial roles. Moreover, many tunnel networks connect to surface structures that later cultures built over. This layering complicates interpretation. A fortress or temple from a recent civilization may sit atop a tunnel carved thousands of years earlier, blending timelines and obscuring origins. Each new occupant repurposed the space, leaving behind traces that blur the structure's first function. What is striking is how widespread these underground systems are. From Europe to Asia, from the Middle East to the Americas, early peoples carved into earth and stone with remarkable consistency. This global distribution raises a profound question. Did different cultures independently develop large-scale subterranean engineering, or were these traditions transmitted through forgotten lines of contact? The similarity of design suggests either shared necessity or shared knowledge, neither of which aligns neatly with standard models. The environmental explanation is often cited. Underground spaces offer stable temperatures, protection from storms, and secure storage. But while these advantages are real, they do not explain why some complexes were built on such massive scales, far exceeding practical needs. Entire communities could have lived in these subterranean labyrinths for extended periods, suggesting pressures or motivations far beyond seasonal shelter. In this part, we explore the hypothesis that underground cities represent more than adaptive architecture. They may be remnants of societies responding to threats we do not fully understand, whether climatic upheaval, cosmic events, warfare, or societal collapse. Whatever drove humans below the surface, the results reveal a level of cooperation and engineering that challenges assumptions about ancient capability. Interpreting these spaces requires humility. Without clear artifacts or inscriptions, meaning becomes speculative. Yet the architecture itself speaks. Multi-tiered layouts, redundant tunnels for movement, communal chambers, and airflow systems designed with intent. These features hint at long-term planning rather than hasty excavation. They suggest communities accustomed to organized labor, skilled craftsmanship, and shared cultural norms guiding construction. Another factor complicating interpretation is erosion and collapse. Portions of ancient tunnel systems are blocked, flooded, or filled with sediment. Modern researchers may be seeing only fragments of larger networks that once extended far beyond their current boundaries. This means our understanding is skewed toward survivable segments, the strongest chambers, the deepest passages, the most protected spaces. Still, even these remnants challenge the notion that early civilizations were small and simple. If underground cities once supported large populations, then our models of demographic growth, resource management, and migration must be revisited. Societies with the capacity to carve entire worlds beneath the earth surely possessed organizational structures comparable to later, more recognized civilizations. Underground constructions also reflect psychological and symbolic dimensions. Living beneath the surface could hold mythological significance, representing rebirth, refuge, the womb of the earth, or the realm of ancestors. If spiritual beliefs motivated construction, then these spaces may have been centers of ritual rather than mere shelters. The consistency in design across cultures supports the idea that similar cosmologies or shared fears shaped human behavior across vast distances. As we continue, we examine how these subterranean realms blur distinctions between survival, spirituality, and social order. They form part of the greater mystery of human origins, evidence that ancient peoples possessed knowledge and capability that remain only partially understood today. The deeper researchers probe into subterranean systems, the clearer it becomes that these constructions were not accidental or improvised. They reflect intentional planning shaped by forces, environmental, social, or cosmic, that pushed ancient societies beneath the surface on a scale too large to ignore. The evidence suggests not merely isolated communities hiding temporarily, but organized populations adapting their entire way of life to underground existence. Among the most puzzling features are ventilation networks that appear engineered to sustain airflow through kilometers of tunnels. Some shafts are angled to capture prevailing winds, while others descend in spirals to draw cool air downward. These designs reveal knowledge of aerodynamics and temperature regulation, skills typically associated with much later civilizations. Yet here they appear in contexts believed to predate written history. Water management inside these underground complexes further strengthens the case for advanced design. Channels carved along floors slope subtly toward reservoirs, while cisterns are positioned at natural pressure points. Such systems imply long-term habitation, since temporary refuge would not require elaborate hydrology. Whoever built these spaces understood not only carving techniques but also the subterranean environment as a living system. Food storage and preservation are additional indicators. Some chambers maintain consistent humidity and temperature, perfect for storing grains or fermenting food. Taken together, these features suggest a society capable of coordinated labor, resource planning, and sustained occupation, foundations of civilization that do not align with the conventional timeline for early human development. But perhaps the greatest mystery arises from the cultural and symbolic elements embedded in these subterranean spaces. Certain chambers are arranged in circular or geometric patterns, reminiscent of ritual or ceremonial use. Carved niches suggest places for offerings, while raised platforms may have served as communal meeting areas or spiritual centers. If underground cities doubled as ritual landscapes, then their builders viewed the earth not merely as shelter but as a sacred domain. Across continents, similar motifs recur: spiral pathways, threshold gates, and chamber clusters arranged like constellations. These similarities could reflect universal human psychology, or they may hint at shared mythologies carried across migrating populations long before recorded history. If ancient peoples conceptualized the underworld as part of their cosmology, they may have shaped their environments accordingly. Another compelling possibility is that underground construction was a response to extreme climate instability. Periods of intense heat, prolonged volcanic activity, or dangerous atmospheric conditions could have driven populations underground. Geological evidence from some regions aligns with this hypothesis, showing layers of ash or rapid temperature fluctuations coinciding with estimated construction periods. If environmental collapse forced humans below ground, then subterranean cities may represent one of the earliest large-scale adaptations to planetary stress. Warfare is another proposed explanation, though the evidence remains controversial. Defensive tunnels, choke points, and hidden exits appear in some complexes, suggesting preparedness for conflict. Yet the sheer size of these underground networks exceeds what defensive architecture alone would require. A fortress does not need hundreds of interconnected chambers or extensive ventilation systems. A functional community does. The final enigma concerns abandonment. Many underground cities show signs of rapid desertion: tools left in place, unfinished passages, collapsed rooms untouched by later occupants. These hints suggest sudden evacuation rather than gradual decline. What force could compel entire populations to leave carefully engineered sanctuaries? Disease? Environmental recovery? Social transformation? The truth remains elusive. In this part, we examine how subterranean worlds reveal a chapter of human history shaped by pressures we are only beginning to reconstruct. They remind us that civilization is not confined to sunlight. It has also flourished in darkness, leaving behind stone labyrinths that challenge our assumptions about resilience, innovation, and the many forms human society has taken. Understanding these spaces requires an interdisciplinary approach. Archaeologists contribute excavation strategies and typology analysis, while geologists study the surrounding strata to determine construction periods and environmental conditions. Engineers evaluate the structural integrity of chambers and tunnels, offering insights into the tools and techniques ancient builders may have used. Anthropologists explore potential cultural motivations, comparing subterranean systems with myths and rituals preserved in surviving traditions. In many cases, modern explorers find only the deepest or most protected sections of these systems. Surface entrances have collapsed, upper levels have eroded, and entire wings of tunnels have been sealed by sediment. This selective preservation distorts our understanding. We may be seeing only the faint echo of far larger complexes whose true extent is lost. Yet even this fragmentary view tells us something profound. Humans have repeatedly turned to the earth as a place of refuge, innovation, and meaning. Whether driven by necessity or belief, they carved environments that required coordination, planning, and shared purpose. These traits are hallmarks of civilization, suggesting that subterranean societies may have been far more advanced than traditional models allow. Across the ancient world, carved symbols, etched signs, and undeciphered scripts stand as silent witnesses to civilizations we cannot fully understand. These markings appear on stone tablets, cave walls, temple pillars, pottery fragments, and ceremonial objects, yet they refuse to reveal their meaning. Unlike known writing systems linked to established linguistic families, many of these mysterious signs form patterns unrelated to any recognized language. They are neither alphabetic nor pictographic in familiar ways, occupying a liminal space between art and communication. The most striking aspect of these symbols is their internal consistency. Wherever they appear, they follow logic, repetition, ordering, and structural rules that suggests they once formed coherent communication. Yet, without bilingual texts, phonetic parallels, or cultural continuity, researchers cannot determine whether these signs represent full languages, ritual codes, proto-writing systems, or mnemonic devices. The absence of decipherable context transforms every inscription into a puzzle with no key. Some undeciphered scripts appear in locations that challenge assumptions about societal complexity. The presence of organized symbolic systems implies advanced cognitive frameworks, shared cultural traditions, and administrative or ceremonial needs. These are traits associated with structured communities, not loosely connected tribal groups. The existence of symbol systems alone suggests a level of societal development that exceeds the conventional timeline. Even more intriguing is the geographic spread of undeciphered motifs. Spirals, crosshatches, grid patterns, branching lines, and stylized anthropomorphic figures appear across continents. While some shapes may reflect universal cognitive tendencies, the recurrence of highly specific motifs raises the possibility of cultural diffusion or shared ideological foundations. Whether through ancient migration, forgotten trade networks, or parallel symbolic evolution, these signs hint at lost connections. Scholars attempt to analyze these scripts using pattern recognition, statistical modeling, and structural comparison. Yet without grammar, phonetics, or known semantics, the signs resist classification. Some systems seem too limited for full linguistic expression, while others contain hundreds of distinct symbols, suggesting complexity beyond simple pictorial notation. One challenge lies in distinguishing symbolic meaning from ritual expression. A carved sign may represent divine concepts, mythological figures, astronomical cycles, or social roles rather than spoken words. Without cultural knowledge, even sophisticated analysis cannot determine intention. The script becomes a preserved echo of thought, stripped of its interpretive framework. Archaeologists face an additional obstacle. Many symbols appear in isolation or as small fragments. A handful of signs on a broken tablet cannot reveal the full structure of a symbolic system, just as a single sentence cannot explain an entire language. Fragmentary evidence leaves enormous gaps that modern scholars struggle to fill. Yet the very existence of these undeciphered writings confirms that ancient humans communicated through symbolic systems that have vanished from the historical record. Their thoughts, philosophies, and stories remain locked behind signs we cannot read. An entire dimension of consciousness, inaccessible to modern interpretation. Some symbols appear alongside astronomical markers, suggesting encoded cosmological knowledge. Alignments with solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles imply that their creators closely observed celestial patterns. If these signs reference constellations or planetary cycles, they may function as ritual calendars or cosmological diagrams, revealing worldviews far richer than surviving artifacts suggest. Other symbols appear on objects of authority, seals, scepters, boundary stones, implying political or legal significance. Such uses indicate hierarchy, governance, and administrative systems now invisible to us. Without decipherment, we lose insight into ancient legal orders and institutional structures. Most puzzling of all are symbols placed in remote or difficult locations, deep caves, cliff faces, and chambers illuminated only at certain times of year. These placements imply ritual initiation or restricted knowledge meant for select individuals. Their secrecy underscores the symbolic weight carried by these signs. Attempts to decode these systems frequently stir debate. Some believe they represent early experiments in writing. Others claim they reflect independent symbolic inventions, branches of human communication that evolved briefly and vanished. The lack of consensus highlights the magnitude of cultural loss over millennia. In this part, we explore how undeciphered scripts offer glimpses of intellectual worlds sealed from modern access. These symbols are fingerprints of civilizations that once spoke, remembered, and dreamed in unique patterns of thought now buried by time. They remind us that the past contains dimensions of meaning still beyond our reach, urging us to continue seeking the key that may one day unlock them. If undeciphered scripts are the silent voices of forgotten civilizations, then the contexts in which they appear reveal the environments where these lost languages once thrived. Many symbols are found not on grand monuments, but on everyday objects, pottery, tools, amulets, spindle whorls, and boundary stones. Their integration into daily life suggests that symbolic communication permeated ancient societies at levels deeper than ceremonial display. One of the most confounding aspects of these symbols is their stability. Unlike known writing systems, which evolve through clear developmental stages, many undeciphered scripts appear fully formed and remain unchanged for centuries. Then, just as abruptly, they vanish from the archaeological record. This sudden emergence and disappearance challenge linear models of linguistic evolution and suggest intellectual traditions that were either deliberately guarded or abruptly disrupted. Another significant puzzle is the role of symbolic systems in preserving social memory. Writing is not merely a form of communication, it is a vessel for knowledge. Laws, rituals, genealogies, astronomical observations, and mythologies may have been encoded in these symbols. When a symbolic system disappears, entire intellectual worlds vanish with it. The loss represents not only linguistic silence, but the collapse of cultural frameworks that shaped how people understood their reality. Some symbol clusters are arranged in patterns that resemble syntax, repeating units, alternating structures, mirrored sequences. Yet without knowing whether these sequences represent phonetic values, ideograms, ritual codes, or mnemonic structures, interpretation remains speculative. Even advanced computational tools cannot assign meaning without comparative reference. The relationship between symbols and landscape further deepens the mystery. Many inscriptions appear on cliffs, hilltops, or sacred valleys, suggesting territorial, ceremonial, or cosmological significance. Some panels illuminate only during specific solar events, hinting at calendrical or astronomical functions. Others appear deep within cave systems, accessible only to select individuals. Their placement implies intentional restriction of knowledge, encoded messages for initiates rather than public communication. The growing use of multispectral imaging and AI-assisted pattern recognition has revealed hidden engravings and faded markings, expanding the corpus of known symbols. Yet technology can only uncover structure, not meaning. Without access to the cultural metaphors, myths, and worldviews that shaped these symbols, modern interpretation remains incomplete. Where ancient peoples saw cosmic truth, we see abstraction. Recent discoveries of inscriptions in submerged sites, remote deserts, and high-altitude shelters suggest that symbolic systems were far more widespread than previously assumed. Their distribution raises questions about ancient networks of interaction, migration, or shared mythic archetypes. These possibilities challenge the notion that early cultures were isolated or cognitively limited. Despite expanding data sets, decipherment remains elusive. Without bilingual artifacts like the Rosetta Stone, scholars rely on indirect methods, contextual placement, artifact associations, or environmental cues. These approaches offer hints but rarely lead to definitive conclusions. The scripts remain suspended between language and art, revealing order but withholding meaning. The implications are profound. If ancient symbolic systems once carried scientific, medicinal, cosmological, or philosophical knowledge, their disappearance represents a rupture in humanity's intellectual continuity. It suggests that some civilizations developed conceptual frameworks now irretrievably lost, not due to lack of sophistication, but because their mediums of knowledge were too fragile to survive. Some scholars propose that certain undeciphered scripts represent ritual sequences rather than language, mnemonic devices encoding performance, ceremony, or spiritual initiation. Others believe the symbols reflect social identity, clan affiliations, lineage markers, territorial claims. Still others argue that they express metaphysical principles, embedding cosmology in abstract form. Each interpretation reveals possibilities, yet none can be confirmed. In this part, we confront the reality that symbolic knowledge can vanish entirely. These scripts are the final traces of civilizations whose intellectual achievements remain sealed from our understanding. Their silence marks not emptiness, but depth, a boundary between what has survived and what once shaped ancient worlds. Across countless cultures, myths and legends speak of earlier ages, epics populated by beings, societies, or civilizations that predate known history. These stories describe people before us, golden ages of abundance, eras of giants, and mysterious visitors from the sea or the sky. While mainstream scholarship often interprets them as symbolic narratives, their striking global consistency raises deeper questions. Why do civilizations separated by oceans and millennia preserve narratives with similar structures, themes, and archetypes? One of the most persistent themes is the existence of an advanced or enlightened group that lived long before historically documented societies. In Greek tradition, this appears as the Age of Kronos, or the era of the Titans. Mesopotamian texts describe antediluvian kings ruling for impossibly long spans. In Mesoamerican myths, gods or semi-divine teachers introduce architecture, astronomy, and agriculture. Polynesian legends speak of culture heroes arriving over the waves to establish order. These parallels suggest either shared ancestral memories or convergent responses to similar historical events. Another recurring element is the presence of giants, or beings of extraordinary stature. From the Nephilim of ancient Hebrew tradition to the Jotnar of Norse lore, from Mesoamerican Quinametsin to the towering figures of Indian epics, stories of large ancestral beings appear with surprising regularity. While often interpreted metaphorically, it is possible that these narratives reflect encounters with distinct hominin groups, unusually tall populations, or mythologized memories of extinct lineages now faintly visible in genetic data. Flood myths provide some of the most compelling cross-cultural parallels. Nearly every major cultural sphere preserves a memory of catastrophic inundation. Sumerian, Greek, Chinese, Indigenous American, Polynesian, Aboriginal Australian, and more. Geological evidence confirms that massive flooding events occurred throughout the melting phases of the last ice age. Ancient peoples may have witnessed coastlines vanish and encoded their trauma into enduring mythic cycles, framing natural catastrophes as divine intervention. Another shared motif involves lost maritime civilizations. Legends describe people emerging from the sea or retreating into the depths after teaching essential skills. These tales appear frequently among coastal cultures, suggesting that rising sea levels may have submerged settlements whose memory survived through oral tradition. If early maritime networks once connected distant regions, their collapse could explain why dispersed groups preserved similar stories despite later geographic isolation. Scholars emphasize caution when comparing myths across cultures. Archetypal structures, creation, destruction, rebirth, moral testing, appear naturally in human cognition. Yet some patterns are too specific to ignore. Tales of luminous visitors, elongated skull ancestors, or cyclical world ages echo across continents. When multiple cultures independently describe the rise and fall of earlier civilizations, the parallels become difficult to attribute solely to coincidence. In this part, we investigate how myth may function as cultural memory, distorted, symbolic, yet anchored in real events. These stories act as bridges linking historical evidence with deeper, undocumented layers of human experience. They may preserve remnants of civilizations erased from the archaeological record, encoded in metaphor and transmitted across generations. Mythologists argue that oral traditions compress thousands of years of memory into symbolic narratives. Cataclysms become battles among gods, migrations become heroic journeys, technological exchanges become tales of divine teachers. These transformations allow memories to survive even as details blur. Within mythology may lie distorted accounts of encounters with unfamiliar peoples, survival of climate upheavals, or interactions with fading cultures whose material traces are lost. Cycles of creation and destruction are another shared theme. Hindu cosmology describes repeated yugas ending in turmoil before renewal. Mesoamerican cosmologies recount suns destroyed by flood, fire, or darkness. Plato's Atlantis, though philosophically framed, reflects the same pattern, a powerful civilization destroyed suddenly by natural forces. Geological records of abrupt climate change mirror these mythic cycles with surprising accuracy. Culture heroes, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Oannes, Maui, symbolize knowledge transmission. They introduce agriculture, astronomy, laws, writing, or navigation. Whether historical figures or mythic archetypes, they point to sudden appearances of sophisticated skills in societies lacking clear developmental pathways. Sky beings and star ancestors complicate interpretation further. While symbolic readings remain valid, some scholars suggest these stories encode celestial events, comets, meteor showers, or unusual astronomical alignments. Others propose they represent encounters with migrating groups possessing advanced knowledge. The ambiguity persists because myth blends metaphor with memory. Understanding these patterns requires interdisciplinary study. Archaeology provides material grounding. Geology reconstructs environmental upheavals. Genetics reveals migrations, and anthropology interprets symbolic frameworks. Taken together, these perspectives suggest that myths may contain fragments of real events magnified across generations. In this part, we explore how mythology preserves echoes of civilizations lost to time. These narratives are not merely stories but repositories of ancient memory, offering glimpses into forgotten epics where giants walked, oceans rose, teachers arrived, and worlds were remade. If myths preserve echoes of forgotten civilizations, then understanding their structure allows us to glimpse what ancient peoples remembered and what they chose to encode. Mythology is not random storytelling. It is a cognitive technology designed to transmit memory through symbolism, rhythm, and narrative form. When similar motifs appear across continents, they may reflect shared human experiences or deep-time cultural memories stretching far beyond recorded history. One common theme is the cyclical destruction and renewal of civilization. Worlds end through fire, water, darkness, serpents, or celestial upheaval. After each catastrophe, survivors rebuild or divine beings create a new age. These mythic cycles resemble geological records showing abrupt climate swings, volcanic winters, rapid sea level rise, and cosmic impacts. Ancient observers may have witnessed these transitions firsthand, encoding them into narratives that framed natural disasters as divine or cosmic events. Another recurring motif involves the arrival of strangers bearing knowledge. These culture heroes are described as luminous, tall, or marked by unusual attributes. They teach agriculture, navigation, writing, medicine, or architecture. Whether historical migrants or mythologized sages, they represent the memory of knowledge transfer between populations, possibly from older societies displaced by environmental catastrophe. Giant narratives appear globally and may encode multiple forms of memory. Encounters with unfamiliar hominin groups, exaggerations of tall or powerful individuals, or mythic reflections of ancestral fear and awe. While symbolic, their universality hints at real interactions long lost to archaeology. Flood myths remain among the most compelling parallels. Meltwater pulses at the end of the last ice age flooded enormous coastal regions. Entire landscapes vanished within generations. For ancient peoples, these events would have appeared apocalyptic. Their stories preserve trauma, transforming geological upheavals into mythic narratives of destruction and rebirth. Celestial beings, star people, sky gods, cosmic messengers populate myths across the world. These figures may symbolize astronomical events such as comets, meteor storms, or rare planetary alignments. Without observational tools, ancient peoples encoded celestial knowledge in narrative form, turning the night sky into a canvas of mythic memory. Legends of lost homelands, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, Kumari Kandam, may represent submerged coastal plains from the late Ice Age. Oral traditions could preserve distant memories of migrations from these drowned landscapes. After the seas rose, the physical evidence disappeared, leaving only stories to carry the memory forward. Myth also encodes social and psychological structures. Heroic journeys map onto ancestral migrations. Divine conflicts mirror real political struggles. Underworld descents reflect shamanic initiation. These symbolic layers complicate interpretation but provide insight into how ancient peoples framed their experiences. Modern research reveals that myth can preserve accurate memories for thousands of years. Indigenous Australian accounts describe sea level rise events dating back more than 7 millennia. This demonstrates that oral tradition, when preserved within ritual systems, can store deep time, environmental, and historical knowledge. In this part, we examine mythology not as fiction, but as a layered archive. Beneath gods and monsters lie memories of migrations, disasters, vanished peoples, and lost civilizations, encoded in narrative structures that survived long after physical traces eroded. Mythologists argue that myth condenses memory, emotion, and meaning into forms durable across generations. Cataclysms become battles among gods. Migrations become heroic voyages. Exchanges of knowledge become stories of divine teachers. These transformations preserve core events even as symbolism evolves. Some myths speak explicitly of predecessors, civilizations destroyed before the rise of present humanity. Their people are described as powerful, wise, or morally flawed. They communicate with the heavens, command elemental forces, or build lost cities now hidden beneath land and sea. While exaggerated, these accounts may reflect memories of real societies whose material culture has vanished. Mythic time often unfolds in vast cycles. Hindu yugas, Mesoamerican suns, and Greek ages all describe successive worlds created and destroyed. These cycles echo natural rhythms, glaciation periods, volcanic intervals, or environmental collapses that reshaped human settlement again and again. Even moral myths encode historical lessons. Warnings about pride, violence, or hubris may reflect societal collapses remembered across generations. Their repetition across cultures suggests that ancient peoples lived through similar crises and encoded their lessons in symbolic form. Understanding these layers requires interdisciplinary study: archaeology for material context, geology for environmental change, genetics for migrations, anthropology for symbolic interpretation. Together, they reveal myth as a vessel carrying memories from deep antiquity. In this part, we explore myth as a bridge between tangible evidence and imagination, a repository where echoes of forgotten civilizations survive, reshaped through metaphor, yet anchored in the experiences of ancient peoples. Genetic research has transformed our understanding of human origins, revealing lineages, migrations, and population shifts invisible to archaeology. Yet among these breakthroughs lies one of the greatest enigmas of prehistory: the discovery of ghost populations, ancient humans who left traces in our DNA, but whose bodies, tools, and cultures have never been found. Their existence suggests entire civilizations that lived, thrived, and vanished without leaving physical evidence. Some of the most striking clues come from deep ancestral DNA. Modern humans across Africa, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas carry genetic fragments that cannot be matched to Neanderthals, Denisovans, or any known hominin. These fragments originate from lineages that diverged hundreds of thousands of years ago, survived long enough to interbreed with early Homo sapiens or other archaic species, and then disappeared completely from the fossil record. In West Africa, up to 19% of certain genomes reflects ancestry from an unidentified archaic group. In Oceania, populations carry Denisovan-like DNA from lineages distinct from the Denisovan fossils known to science. In Asia, ancient genomes reveal traces of archaic humans who left no bones, tools, or sites behind. These findings imply that humanity once shared the planet with multiple intelligent branches, most now lost to time. Ghost populations reveal that human evolution was not a linear sequence of replacements, but a mosaic of interactions. Lineages met, mixed, diverged, and merged again in patterns far more complex than traditional models suggest. Where archaeology sees silence, genetics uncovers hidden histories. Selection patterns provide further insight. Some ghost DNA fragments give immune advantages, altitude resistance, or metabolic adaptations, implying that these groups mastered demanding environments. Their biological legacy hints at cultural or technological knowledge that has not survived physically. The timing of these interactions deepens the mystery. Genetic evidence suggests multiple episodes of interbreeding across tens of thousands of years. These encounters imply coexistence, cooperation, competition, or cultural exchange. Yet archaeology provides no trace of these peoples, no settlements, tools, or remains. Several explanations exist. These groups may have lived in tropical zones where fossils degrade rapidly, or in regions still unexplored by science. They may have occupied coastal landscapes drowned by post-glacial sea level rise. Or their material culture may have relied on organic materials that left little trace. Ghost populations challenge the assumption that Homo sapiens outcompeted all rivals immediately upon dispersal. Instead, the world appears to have been shared by multiple human species, each adapting in its own way. Some vanished entirely. Others live on through the genetic footprints they left in us. These discoveries force us to reconsider what constitutes a civilization. If entire peoples can disappear without leaving artifacts, then material evidence alone cannot define the human story. DNA becomes the final archive, preserving memories of encounters, migrations, and adaptations that stone and bone failed to record. These findings raise profound questions. Who were these archaic peoples? Did they develop symbolic traditions, complex societies, or unique technologies? Without fossils, we must infer their capabilities from the advantages they imparted: disease resistance, environmental adaptation, and physiological traits that shaped human survival. Some researchers believe ghost populations represent multiple unknown species rather than one. If true, deep prehistory hosted a diversity of intelligent beings far beyond what we recognize. Their disappearance may reflect climate change, integration, or demographic collapse. Advances in computational genetics now allow reconstruction of hypothetical genomes, offering a glimpse into these vanished groups' biology. Though imperfect, such models help illuminate lives that left no material trace. Ghost lineages remind us that human history is a braided river of merging and vanishing streams. Without material culture, they survive only in the code written inside us. Ghost populations challenge not only our understanding of human origins, but also our assumptions about what counts as evidence. If entire lineages could vanish without leaving fossils, tools, or settlements, then the archaeological record reflects only the most durable fragments of a much larger human story. In this part, we explore how genetic shadows reveal civilizations science has never seen. One of the clearest clues comes from admixture signals, patterns in modern DNA that record interbreeding with unknown hominins. These signals appear at multiple points across tens of thousands of years, suggesting repeated contact with different archaic populations. Each interaction implies coexistence with groups adapted to specific environments and possessing traits valued enough to persist through natural selection. Some ghost DNA fragments improve immunity, indicating that unknown groups possessed specialized knowledge of local diseases. Others enhance altitude adaptation, implying that certain lineages thrived in highland regions long before Homo sapiens arrived. Still others influence metabolism, suggesting diets and survival strategies suited to unique ecological niches. These inherited advantages offer glimpses of vanished worlds through biological clues. Population size models add further mystery. Genetic reconstructions show that some ghost groups were large, stable, and structured, consistent with societies capable of maintaining cultural continuity. If these populations interacted with early humans for millennia, they likely had traditions, stories, and ways of life now erased except for the genetic traces they left behind. The geographic spread of ghost ancestry suggests a deeply interconnected prehistoric world. West Africa preserves signals from archaic groups that diverged hundreds of thousands of years ago. Southeast Asia shows multiple Denisovan-like ancestries. Oceania carries genetic traces from lineages even older than known Denisovans. These patterns indicate a landscape once inhabited by diverse human species whose interactions spanned continents. Why do these groups leave no fossils? Several explanations are possible. They may have lived in tropical environments hostile to bone preservation. They may have relied on organic tools that decayed quickly. They may have occupied coastal regions swallowed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. Or their remains may lie untouched in regions where excavation has barely begun. Geneticists also identify ghost events, sudden bursts of gene flow that end abruptly. These patterns may reflect environmental disasters, competition, cultural barriers, or rapid population collapse. Each event marks a turning point where entire groups disappeared, leaving only microscopic traces within surviving lineages. Identity remains the greatest mystery of all. What languages did these people speak? What myths did they tell? Did they make art, practice rituals, or build structures now lost to erosion? Without physical evidence, we can only infer their intellectual world from the footprints their genes left in us. Yet DNA suggests prolonged coexistence. Patterns of introgression indicate not single encounters, but repeated interactions, suggesting cooperation, shared landscapes, and possibly cultural exchange. Some researchers argue that ghost populations may have passed knowledge as well as genes, sharing environmental insights, medicinal plant practices, or survival strategies that early humans adopted. Recent breakthroughs in environmental DNA detection push the frontier further. Scientists can now identify genetic traces in cave sediments or ancient soils. This technology may eventually reveal the presence of ghost populations even if no bones survive, uncovering entirely new branches of the human story. Ghost lineages force a profound rethinking of civilization. If entire peoples can vanish without leaving durable artifacts, then physical remains alone cannot define humanity's past. Some civilizations may have existed in forms that left little trace: nomadic networks, coastal navigators, forest dwellers, or cultures built on perishable materials. In this part, we confront the staggering possibility that human evolution is filled with civilizations erased from the archaeological record. Their stories endure only inside us, written not in stone or bone, but in genetic code. Throughout the archaeological record, certain artifacts appear hopelessly out of place. Objects whose age, craftsmanship, or technological sophistication does not align with the layers in which they are found. These anomalies, often labeled out-of-place artifacts, challenge established timelines and confront researchers with gaps in the conventional narrative of human development. While some can be explained by natural disturbance or simple misclassification, others remain deeply perplexing. Some artifacts exhibit a level of precision far beyond what is expected for their assigned age. Stone blocks cut with near-modern flatness, drill holes showing rotational speeds far exceeding accepted ancient technologies, or metallurgical compositions requiring advanced smelting knowledge. These discoveries force us to ask whether certain ancient societies achieved technological heights not yet recognized, or whether the timeline itself requires revision. Other anomalies involve objects found in geological layers far older than any known human civilization. Polished spheres, metallic shapes embedded in ancient matrices, or patterned stones reflecting deliberate design appear in contexts where their existence seems impossible. While fringe claims must be treated skeptically, peer-reviewed anomalies exist that resist conventional explanation even under rigorous scrutiny. Some artifacts appear suddenly, without the gradual developmental stages typical of technological evolution. Fully formed pottery traditions, sudden architectural leaps, or symbolic systems emerging with no detectable prototypes. These discontinuities mirror patterns seen in DNA and mythology, suggesting that lost cultures may have influenced later societies in ways not captured by the surviving archaeological record. Megalithic construction illustrates this mystery vividly. Across continents, massive stone structures arise within a relatively narrow time frame, using techniques that defy simplistic explanations of trial and error. Transporting multi-ton monoliths, shaping them with symmetry, and aligning them with astronomical precision implies knowledge transmitted from an earlier, possibly undocumented source. The distribution of anomalous artifacts also hints at forgotten networks of contact. Similar motifs, tools, or design principles appear in cultures believed to be isolated. Either multiple societies independently developed similar techniques, or they inherited fragments of a shared, older tradition, now erased by time. Cave discoveries add yet another dimension. Objects sealed away for tens of thousands of years reveal symbolic and artistic sophistication once assumed exclusive to later populations. Engraved bones, geometric designs, or pigments arranged with intentional structure point to cognitive worlds more complex than expected. One controversial category involves advanced metallurgical objects found in contexts where metalworking should not exist. High-purity alloys, intricate castings, or heat treatments inconsistent with known technologies invite speculation. Did these items arise through trade with unknown groups, independent innovation, or traditions that vanished abruptly? Sudden cultural disappearances compound the mystery. Some societies capable of exquisite craftsmanship vanish from the record, leaving behind artifacts displaying skills not adopted by successors. This suggests knowledge that was either specialized, restricted, or dependent on lost environmental or social conditions. Some researchers propose that anomalies may represent remnants of civilizations destroyed by natural disasters. Rapid collapse could leave behind sophisticated relics without the expected developmental layers. If rising seas, volcanic events, or climate shocks erased entire populations, surviving groups may have lacked the ability to maintain inherited technologies. Other anomalies appear as isolated masterpieces, objects far exceeding the general skill level of their context. These may reflect lost guilds, secret traditions, or highly specialized artisans. Their existence implies educational systems or cultural hierarchies now invisible. Interpretation becomes even more complex when anomalies are symbolic rather than technological. Carved motifs, geometric patterns, or astronomical markers may encode knowledge systems that did not survive in material form. They could represent calendars, navigational tools, or cosmological diagrams belonging to civilizations with intellectual traditions we have yet to decode. While skepticism is essential, dismissing anomalies limits scientific progress. Each unexplained artifact invites reevaluation of assumptions and refinement of methods. As analytical tools improve, new data reveal a past far more intricate than once imagined. Ultimately, out-of-place artifacts remind us that technological evolution is not linear. Civilizations rise, stagnate, regress, and sometimes vanish completely, leaving behind fragments that defy classification and hint at forgotten heights. As anomalous artifacts accumulate across excavation sites and geological contexts, they collectively form a pattern too persistent to dismiss. These objects, technologically advanced, culturally complex, or chronologically discordant, suggest that human development did not follow a single upward line. Instead, the archaeological record shows bursts of innovation, abrupt disappearances, and sudden reappearances that challenge linear evolutionary models. One striking feature is their uneven distribution. Highly sophisticated artifacts appear in regions where surrounding material culture seems comparatively simple. A finely carved ornament may lie beside basic tools. A complex device may be uncovered in a site otherwise lacking technological depth. Such juxtapositions imply either external influence or isolated specialists whose knowledge was limited to certain groups. Equally perplexing are artifacts with astronomical implications. Engraved stones, metal discs, or aligned markers incorporate solstice lines, stellar risings, or long-term celestial cycles. Their precision suggests systematic skywatching and mathematical understanding inconsistent with conventional expectations. These objects may represent fragments of ancient observational systems whose original cultural contexts are lost. Submerged anomalies deepen the mystery. Rising seas after the last ice age drowned coastal plains where early societies once lived. Artifacts recovered from continental shelves, carved stones, patterned ceramics, unusual tools, may come from vanished cultures whose entire record lies underwater. Without large-scale underwater archaeology, these civilizations remain invisible. Migration adds further complexity. Nomadic groups may have carried heirloom objects across regions, depositing them in contexts different from their origins. These artifacts could appear centuries or millennia after their creation, confounding researchers who expect local development. Hybrid artifacts, combining design elements from distant cultures, raise questions about contact networks. Tools blending stylistic principles from separate regions may reflect forgotten routes of trade or cultural exchange. Their presence suggests that prehistoric interaction spheres were larger and more interconnected than surviving settlements indicate. The most difficult anomalies involve unfamiliar materials or manufacturing methods. Some objects contain high-quality alloys requiring controlled temperatures. Others exhibit surface treatments that resist modern replication. These artifacts challenge assumptions about ancient resource management and technological capability. Clusters of anomalies within specific layers indicate brief periods of technological fluorescence. Innovation surges, peaks, and then vanishes abruptly. This pattern resembles punctuated evolution, but cultural declines often reflect social upheaval, environmental change, or population movement. Many anomalies appear in ritual contexts. Carved figurines, geometric sequences, or symbolic tools found near ceremonial structures imply complex intellectual frameworks, cosmologies, encoded calendars, or mythic systems, now indecipherable without cultural continuity. Ultimately, out-of-place artifacts reveal the fragility of cultural memory. Technologies can flourish and then vanish without leaving developmental traces. What remains is a fragmentary record, material clues pointing to civilizations whose full stories are lost. Some anomalies lie far from their material sources. Jade axes appear hundreds of kilometers from quarries. Obsidian blades travel across seas. Pigments originate in distant mountains. These distributions imply advanced procurement strategies or trade networks unrecognized by current models. Other artifacts show surprising longevity. Styles or techniques reappear long after they supposedly disappeared, indicating either survival in isolated enclaves or deliberate cultural revival. These patterns challenge linear assumptions and highlight complex transmission. Symbolic continuity across continents adds another puzzle. Geometric motifs, ritual designs, or artistic patterns emerge in cultures with no known contact. Whether diffusion or convergent symbolism, their recurrence suggests forgotten intellectual traditions. As scientific tools advance, microwear and residue analyses reinterpret many anomalies. Decorative objects reveal traces of ritual substances, pigments, or medicinal compounds. Once underestimated items gain new meaning, showing that ancient technologies were often multidimensional. Ultimately, anomalous artifacts may be fragments of innovations from civilizations erased by time. Their creators left no written record, yet their work survives as puzzles that force scholars to reconsider what ancient peoples achieved. Across the world lie ancient cities that once thrived as hubs of commerce, ritual, and political authority, yet now stand silent, abandoned, and half-consumed by earth and vegetation. Their fall defies simple explanation. Some collapsed suddenly, others faded slowly, and many left no clear successor to inherit their knowledge. These ghost cities form one of archaeology's most haunting enigmas. How can societies capable of monumental architecture and complex planning vanish without leaving a coherent narrative? One striking feature is the abruptness of decline. Excavations reveal bustling populations, expanding infrastructure, and active trade networks, followed by immediate abandonment. Tools lie where they were dropped, construction projects halt mid-phase, and ritual spaces appear frozen in time. Such patterns imply forces beyond ordinary political or economic transitions. Environmental theories explain some cases. Drought cycles, monsoon failures, volcanic eruptions, and shifting river systems could destabilize agriculture. Yet these explanations fail in others. Some cities collapsed despite stable climate indicators. Others adapted successfully for centuries before disappearing in a final, unexplained event. Equally mysterious are cities lacking signs of warfare. Fortifications show no damage, skeletons show no trauma, and trade goods remain abundant. These were not destroyed by invasion. They were deserted voluntarily, as though entire populations chose exile or were compelled by unseen pressures. Cultural transformation could play a role. Shifts in belief systems, loss of elite authority, or ideological upheaval may have undermined social cohesion. Yet in many regions, successor groups show no memory of the monumental cities beneath their settlements, indicating a break so severe that cultural identity itself dissolved. Trade disruptions offer another possibility. Cities, reliant on long-distance exchange, faced collapse when maritime routes shifted or caravan networks faltered. But even this fails to explain why many prime locations were never reoccupied. Some collapsing centers reveal extreme social stratification near the end, lavish elite compounds beside impoverished quarters. Inequality may have sparked internal unrest or mass migration. Yet, material evidence rarely reveals clear triggers. Disease offers clues. Epidemics leave faint archaeological fingerprints. A sudden mortality shock could destabilize governance, cripple food production, and scatter survivors. Yet, confirming ancient pandemics remains difficult. More enigmatic are cities with celestial alignments. Urban grids oriented to solstices or star risings may have tied identity to ritual calendars. If astronomical cycles shifted or sacred expectations failed, populations may have perceived existential rupture. Some lost centers feature water systems, reservoirs, canals, filtration networks that remained functional even as cities emptied. This indicates that collapse was social rather than infrastructural. In other cases, populations appear to have migrated outward into rural settlements, abandoning monumentality in favor of decentralized living. This challenges the assumption that urbanization is always the apex of development. A handful of sites show ritual closures, burned temples, sealed chambers, or final offerings, suggesting deliberate endings based on cosmology rather than catastrophe. Hybrid architecture appearing in some cities implies cosmopolitan exchange. Their collapse may reflect the breakdown of these networks, leaving culturally blended centers without support. Technological regression also appears. Craft traditions vanish abruptly, replaced by simpler forms, evidence of knowledge loss, perhaps due to depopulation or elite displacement. Even climate proxies, tree rings, sediment cores, fail to provide universal explanations. For every collapse linked to climate stress, another occurred under stable conditions. Some scholars suggest that certain cities were never meant to be permanent. They may have served as ceremonial capitals tied to specific eras, abandoned after ritual cycles ended. Yet the monumental scale of many cities makes this difficult to accept universally. Ultimately, no single cause explains the global phenomenon of abandoned ancient cities. Their collapses appear multidimensional, interwoven forces triggering cascading failures that left behind empty streets and enduring mystery. If the disappearance of ancient cities teaches us anything, it is that complexity offers both strength and vulnerability. Civilizations that mastered irrigation, astronomy, architecture, and administration often collapsed not from a single cause, but from cascading failures, each stress amplifying another until recovery became impossible. One of the most revealing patterns is silent decline. Some cities show gradual population thinning with no signs of disaster. Households shrink, workshops close, markets empty, and peripheral districts retreat inward. This slow fade suggests economic stagnation, resource exhaustion, or social fatigue. Yet the absence of clear trauma means the true drivers remain elusive. In other cases, collapse appears sudden and coordinated. Entire districts are left intact, storage rooms remain full, and ceremonial centers look as though the last ritual occurred only moments before abandonment. This implies decisions made at a collective level, perhaps influenced by omens, cosmological beliefs, or perceived divine warnings. When identity is tied to sacred cycles, a missed alignment or celestial shift could be interpreted as a command to leave. Agricultural stress often plays a role, but its effects are inconsistent. Some cities adapted brilliantly with terraces, canals, and hydraulic engineering, thriving for centuries despite harsh environments. Their sudden failure suggests that agriculture alone cannot explain collapse. Instead, social cohesion might have weakened, elite authority fractured, or external pressures disrupted internal organization. Another clue lies in trade patterns. When long-distance exchange collapses, cities lose access to resources essential to their status, prestige goods, metals, dyes, or ritual items. Yet many declining cities contain ample stored goods, suggesting the cause was not shortage, but destabilization of the systems that gave these goods meaning. Spiritual and ideological transitions appear in the archaeological record as well. Temples shift orientation, iconography changes, and ritual objects become simplified or replaced. Such transformations can fracture collective identity, especially when elite groups rely on sacred authority. When spiritual legitimacy fails, urban unity may collapse with it. Some cities were abandoned even as construction continued, new buildings rising while old ones fell into disrepair. This uneven development hints at factionalism or political fragmentation. Competing groups may have redirected labor and resources, destabilizing shared infrastructure. Environmental hazards sometimes accelerated collapse. Earthquakes, floods, fires, or dust storms could strike densely populated centers with devastating effect. Yet many cities rebuilt after such events. Collapse occurred only when disasters coincided with deeper structural weaknesses. Abandonment patterns also differ dramatically. Some populations migrated en masse toward new centers, others dispersed into small rural communities. Some vanished entirely with no identifiable successors. These differing outcomes show that collapse was not uniform, but shaped by cultural choices, political structures, and regional dynamics. Even more mysterious are cities rebuilt multiple times before final abandonment. These pulse collapse cycles suggest resilience punctuated by moments of crisis, each recovery weaker than the last. Eventually, the cost of rebuilding exceeded the community's capacity, prompting final departure. Urban acoustics and spatial arrangements reveal additional clues. Many ancient cities were designed to amplify ritual sound, celestial light, or seasonal shadows. If ritual cycles failed, due to precession shifts or ideological change, the city's sacred purpose could vanish. Without that purpose, the center lost meaning. In this part, we examine how ancient cities functioned as living organisms, dependent on resource flow, belief systems, political stability, and environmental balance. When any one of these systems faltered, collapse became possible. When several faltered at once, collapse became inevitable. The ghost cities that remain are not mere ruins. They are records of vanished decision-making systems, forgotten ideologies, and social frameworks that once shaped millions of lives. Their silence speaks not of failure, but of complexity, and of histories still beyond our full grasp. If the disappearance of ancient cities teaches us anything, it is that complexity offers both strength and vulnerability. Civilizations that mastered irrigation, astronomy, architecture, and administration often collapsed not from a single cause but from cascading failures, each stress amplifying another until recovery became impossible. One revealing pattern is silent decline. Some cities show thinning populations with no signs of disaster. Households shrink, workshops close, markets empty, and outlying districts recede. This slow fade suggests stagnation, exhaustion, or social fatigue. Yet the absence of trauma means the true drivers remain hidden. Other collapses appear sudden and coordinated. Entire districts remain intact, storerooms full, ritual spaces undisturbed. Such abandonment implies collective decisions, perhaps shaped by omens, cosmological beliefs, or perceived divine warnings. When identity is tied to sacred cycles, a missed celestial marker could be interpreted as a command to leave. Agricultural stress is another factor, though inconsistently. Some cities adapted masterfully with terraces, canals, and hydraulic systems, thriving for centuries in harsh climates. Their sudden collapse signals deeper issues: fractured authority, weakened cohesion, or external disruption. Trade patterns provide additional clues. When long-distance exchange falters, cities lose access to prestige goods, metals, pigments, or ritual resources. Yet many declining centers retain abundant stores, suggesting the problem was not scarcity, but breakdown of systems that gave these materials meaning. Spiritual and ideological shifts appear as temples reoriented, symbols altered, or rituals simplified. When sacred legitimacy declines, social unity may collapse with it. Belief systems that once upheld political structures may have fractured beyond repair. Some cities were abandoned while construction continued, new buildings rising even as old ones decayed. This uneven growth points to factionalism. Rival groups may have redirected labor and resources, undermining shared infrastructure. Natural hazards sometimes accelerated decline. Earthquakes, floods, or dust storms could devastate dense centers. Yet rebuilding often followed such events. Collapse occurred only when disasters intersected with larger structural weaknesses. Abandonment patterns also vary. Some populations migrated to new urban hubs, others dispersed into rural settlements. Some vanished with no obvious successors. These trajectories reflect cultural choices, political pressures, and local conditions. More mysterious are cities rebuilt multiple times before final desertion. These pulse collapse cycles show resilience punctuated by crises, each recovery weaker. Eventually, the cost of rebuilding exceeded capacity, triggering departure. Urban acoustics and spatial design add further clues. Many cities amplified ritual sound, celestial light, or seasonal shadows. If ritual cycles failed due to precessional drift or ideological change, the city's sacred function could dissolve, stripping the urban center of meaning. In this part, we explore how ancient cities behaved like living organisms, dependent on resource flow, belief systems, governance, and environmental harmony. When one system faltered, collapse became possible. When several faltered at once, collapse became inevitable. The ghost cities that survive today are not merely ruins. They are records of vanished decision-making systems, forgotten ideologies, and social structures that once shaped countless lives. Their silence expresses not failure, but complexity, an echo of histories still beyond our full comprehension. These abandoned centers illustrate how societal fragility often hides beneath impressive achievements. Complexity requires balance. When belief, governance, economy, and environment fall out of sync, collapse cascades swiftly. Lost cities remind us that even the greatest human endeavors depend on invisible systems, trust, meaning, and cohesion that can dissolve without leaving measurable traces. Their remnants challenge researchers to rethink assumptions about resilience. Collapse is rarely the end. It is transformation. People reorganize, migrate, adapt, and carry fragments of old identities into new landscapes. What appears as disappearance may be evolution, hidden from record yet alive in memory, ideology, or diaspora traditions. Across the many enigmas of ancient history, three overarching hypotheses attempt to explain why evidence of lost civilizations remains fragmented or absent. These theories do not replace established science, but illuminate its uncertainties. Each offers a framework for interpreting unexplained technological leaps, genetic anomalies, abandoned cities, and cultural discontinuities. Together, they serve as provisional patches for the vast blank spaces in humanity's early story. The first hypothesis argues that the evidence simply has not yet been found. Archaeology, by nature, captures only a fraction of all past human activity. Most materials decay, landscapes shift, and countless regions remain unexplored. Entire cultures may lie beneath oceans, deserts, jungles, or untouched plateaus. What appear to be sudden cultural beginnings may reflect uneven preservation rather than true historical reality. This idea aligns with a fundamental scientific principle. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Yet even this explanation struggles with persistent anomalies, advanced artifacts lacking developmental stages, symbolic systems emerging fully formed, or technologies disappearing without transition. While missing evidence explains much, it does not fully resolve these discontinuities. The second hypothesis proposes a cyclical model of civilization. Rather than a single continuous ascent, human societies may have risen and fallen repeatedly. In this view, earlier cycles of innovation were erased by time, catastrophe, or cultural fragmentation. Civilizations might have achieved regional sophistication only to collapse and be forgotten. Later societies, unaware of their predecessors, may appear as isolated firsts despite inheriting echoes of ancient knowledge. This framework matches patterns seen in climate records, oral traditions, and genetic bottlenecks that point to repeated contractions and expansions in human populations. This perspective explains abrupt cultural leaps, or the sudden appearance of advanced skills. After collapse, survivors may restart at a simpler level, leaving only fragments of prior achievements scattered in the archaeological record. The third hypothesis centers on catastrophic events capable of wiping out entire societies. Rapid sea level rise, volcanic winters, mega droughts, or cosmic impacts could erase settlements, disrupt populations, and bury evidence beneath meters of sediment. Geological archives confirm multiple abrupt environmental shocks, some severe enough to reshape coastlines or extinguish entire lineages. Under this model, even advanced cultures might vanish almost completely, especially if they lived along coastlines later submerged by post-glacial oceans. Catastrophic explanations fit regions with long occupational gaps, vanished genetic lineages, or sudden cultural collapses. Yet they raise difficult questions. How large could these civilizations have been if so few traces remain? These three hypotheses, missing evidence, cyclical history, and catastrophic erasure, are not mutually exclusive. They likely interacted. A city weakened by internal decline may not withstand a sudden drought. A culture fractured by migration may collapse during a seismic event. A coastal civilization may vanish beneath rising seas, leaving survivors who retain only oral memory. Some researchers propose hybrid interpretations, blending all three models. Evidence may be missing not merely due to decay, but because catastrophes reorganized landscapes and erased continuity. Cycles of rise and collapse may compress technological achievements into short eras, leaving only occasional artifacts as witnesses. This layered view suggests that humanity's story is stratified rather than linear, with each era partially overwriting the last. Oral traditions may preserve echoes of earlier cycles, while material remnants survive only in isolated pockets. As technologies such as sedimentary DNA, satellite imaging, and deep-sea mapping advance, new discoveries constantly revise these hypotheses. Ultimately, these models remind us that science rarely offers final answers. Instead, it frames uncertainty, acknowledging that the human story remains incomplete, built from fragments that hint at civilizations older, richer, and more complex than we can yet fully trace. While the three major hypotheses aim to explain the disappearance of lost civilizations, each reveals the limits of scientific certainty. In this part, we explore how these frameworks intersect, where they succeed, and why none can fully resolve the mysteries embedded in archaeology, genetics, geology, and mythic memory. The hypothesis of missing evidence emphasizes preservation bias. Human history is buried unevenly. Landscapes shift, coastlines drown, forests reclaim stone, deserts erase footprints. Yet persistent anomalies challenge the idea that missing data alone explains everything. Advanced craftsmanship appears with no gradual buildup. Symbolic systems emerge fully formed. Technologies disappear abruptly, even in stable regions. These patterns suggest that deeper structural forces shaped human development. The cyclical hypothesis offers another explanation. Climate rhythms, demographic bottlenecks, and ecological shifts point to repeating waves of cultural rise and collapse. Many oral traditions describe earlier ages destroyed by fire, flood, or darkness. This model accounts for abrupt leaps and sudden regressions, but it cannot fully explain genetic contact with unknown lineages or why certain innovations reappear thousands of years later while others vanish forever. Catastrophic models explain sharp declines, megadroughts, eruptions, cosmic impacts, geomagnetic disruptions. Such events can annihilate societies, redraw landscapes, and sever cultural memory. Yet catastrophe alone cannot explain recurring architectural motifs across continents, or the synchronous collapse of unrelated cultures without a singular global trigger. Each hypothesis solves part of the puzzle while contradicting other evidence. Missing data explains the patchiness of the archaeological record, but not isolated technological brilliance. Cycles explain long-term rhythms, but not fully formed innovations appearing suddenly. Catastrophes explain destruction, but not continuity across vast regions. A growing view among researchers is that no single hypothesis is sufficient. Instead, human prehistory reflects overlapping processes, long cycles of cultural expansion, sudden environmental shocks, and uneven preservation of material culture. Lost civilizations may not have been global superpowers, but interconnected regional networks, sharing knowledge systems now visible only as scattered fragments. This integrative approach also explains genetic ghost lineages. Unknown populations could have thrived during earlier cycles, only to vanish after catastrophes. Their descendants blended with surviving groups, leaving biological markers but minimal artifacts. In isolated regions, fragments of their knowledge may have endured, leading to sudden bursts of innovation that appear without precedence. Mythology adds another dimension. Flood stories, fire myths, and Golden Age narratives echo across cultures, suggesting shared memories of upheaval. While not literal records, their consistency hints at deep historical resonance. Technological advances constantly reshape these hypotheses. Satellite imaging uncovers buried cities. Deep-sea scanning reveals drowned settlements. Sedimentary DNA identifies vanished populations. Each discovery confirms that human history is deeper, older, and more complex than earlier models assumed. Ultimately, the three major hypotheses, missing evidence, cyclical history, catastrophic erasure, are best viewed as complementary lenses rather than competing theories. Each illuminates different aspects of humanity's forgotten chapters. Science cannot yet deliver a complete narrative, but it can map the boundaries of what is known and highlight the vast regions still hidden. These frameworks also explain why certain mysteries persist. Archaeology depends on survivable materials. Genetics depends on preserved biological samples. Geology depends on detectable markers. When civilizations rely on organic tools, inhabit unstable environments, or perish during volatile climate eras, their traces vanish. What remains are anomalies, artifacts without context, genes without identities, stories without timestamps. Interdisciplinary research reveals increasing interconnectedness among ancient peoples. Trade, migration, ritual exchange, and symbolic diffusion moved across continents, hinting at networks now erased. Lost civilizations may be defined not by monuments, but by influence, ideas, motifs, or genetic legacies that endure even when the societies themselves disappear. In the end, the three hypotheses guide interpretation rather than deliver answers. They underscore the humility required in studying deep time. The story of civilization is still unfolding, shaped by discoveries yet to come. After exploring oceans, tunnels, symbols, DNA, and forgotten cities, we reach an unsettling truth. Even with all modern tools, humanity still cannot reconstruct its own full story. The fragments we possess, ruins, genes, myths, artifacts, suggest a history far older, richer, and more complex than conventional timelines allow. In this final chapter, we examine how science now acknowledges its limits and why the mystery of lost civilizations remains unresolved. One of the clearest indicators of these limits is the widening gap between discovery and explanation. Archaeologists uncover new sites faster than they can interpret them. Geneticists detect lineages with no archaeological signature. Geologists identify sudden global shifts with no matching cultural record. These mismatches reveal how incomplete our reconstruction truly is. Another challenge is the fragility of evidence. Most human activity leaves no permanent trace. Organic materials decay, settlements erode, coastlines migrate, landscapes transform. What survives is a fraction, lucky remnants preserved by chance rather than design. The past we reconstruct is not a full narrative, but a surviving shard. Even written history covers only the thinnest slice of time, and it is biased, selective, and often contradictory. Before writing, memory lived in stories, rituals, and symbols. When those cultures vanished, their knowledge vanished with them. What remains appears in myths, motifs, and faint material patterns that resist linear interpretation. Scientific models depend on measurable evidence, yet prehistory is dominated by ambiguity. Radiocarbon limits, sediment disturbances, tectonic shifts, and climate oscillations distort timelines. Artifacts may seem older or younger than they truly are. DNA survives unevenly. Even our strongest tools widen their error margins the deeper we look. This makes room for lost civilizations. A culture using mostly organic materials could disappear without trace. A coastal society erased by sea level rise would leave its cities buried underwater. A symbolic system carved onto wood or fiber would be gone forever. Entire eras of innovation may have vanished simply because their mediums were fragile. The deeper we search, the more contradictions emerge. Architectural leaps appear without prototypes. Genetic admixture events involve unknown peoples. Isolated cultures share myths of destruction and renewal. Cities collapse simultaneously across continents. These patterns suggest underlying structures, shared memories, migrations, or cycles beyond our current understanding. These gaps reveal an important truth. The further back we look, the less confident our interpretations become. Early archaeological frameworks assumed linear progress, but new discoveries reveal non-linear patterns, knowledge appearing suddenly, disappearing abruptly, rising and falling without predictable sequence. This forces science to shift from certainty to probability. As interdisciplinary research expands, the unknown grows alongside the known. Satellites reveal buried geometries. Sonar maps submerged terraces. Ancient DNA uncovers migrations without cultural context. Linguistics hints at vanished language families. Each breakthrough enlarges the realm of possibility. Scientific humility arises not from weakness, but from scale. Human civilization occupies a brief moment in geological time. Countless societies may have risen and fallen long before written memory. Their tools recycled, monuments eroded, rituals forgotten, yet their influence may persist in genes, myths, or unexplained parallels. Modern science cannot deny the possibility of lost civilizations. It can only state that current evidence is insufficient to confirm or dismiss them. Absence of remains is not absence of existence, only absence of survival. If modern science accepts that vast portions of human history remain hidden, the question becomes, what does this mean for our understanding of civilization itself? Rather than marking the beginning, recorded history may represent only the newest layer of a much deeper human story. In this final part, we examine how scientific humility reshapes our view of who we are and who may have come before us. One emerging insight is that humanity's timeline resembles a braided river more than a straight line. Memory, loss, reinvention, and forgotten chapters intertwine. Every new discovery, a drowned temple, an anomalous tool, an unidentified genetic lineage, adds a thread to a tapestry still mostly missing. What we call prehistory may in fact be residue from multiple earlier civilizations erased by time, disaster, or cultural fragmentation. This reframing forces a reevaluation of progress. If advanced symbols, astronomical knowledge, or engineering traditions appear suddenly in distant regions, they may be rediscoveries rather than inventions. Civilizations may rebuild atop ruins without knowing what preceded them. The innovations we celebrate today may echo echoes, faint reflections of deeper, older knowledge cycles. Humility becomes essential. Science can analyze what survives, but it cannot speak for what vanished. Lost civilizations may not have been vast empires. They could have been sophisticated regional cultures, erased by shifting rivers, rising seas, earthquakes, drought, disease, or simple entropy. Their absence in the record reflects not insignificance, but fragility. Another implication is that myth and memory deserve renewed attention. While myths are symbolic, their global consistency, floods, firestorms, golden ages, sky beings, sudden destruction, suggests shared memory rooted in real events. These narratives may encode ancient catastrophes or cultural collapses that science has yet to fully reconstruct. Modern tools expand the horizon of discovery. LiDAR reveals hidden cities beneath rainforest canopies. Deep-sea mapping exposes drowned terraces and harbor walls. Sedimentary DNA reveals vanished populations. AI-based pattern recognition uncovers forgotten road networks and astronomical alignments. Each advance widens the field of possibility. Recognizing scientific limits fosters a broader, interdisciplinary approach. Archaeology, genetics, geology, climatology, linguistics, anthropology, they all hold fragments of the truth. Only together can they approximate the larger picture. Even then, the result is an outline missing its center. Lost civilizations challenge the assumption that modern humanity represents the first apex of complexity. Even small, localized cultures may have reached heights of innovation erased before influencing successors. If so, modern civilization is not the culmination of human potential, but one expression among many across deep time. In this reflection, we confront the immensity of the unknown behind us. Science does not dismiss lost civilizations. It admits that the available evidence cannot rule them out. The Earth is old. Humanity is old. Civilization may be far older than we imagine. The mystery persists because the story of our species is still unfolding. Beneath the next layer of soil, the next coastal shelf, the next genome, may lie discoveries capable of overturning every assumption. As we step forward, expanding scientific tools will peel back layers once unreachable. Permafrost may reveal DNA from unknown hominins. Ocean excavations may expose cities drowned at the Ice Age's end. Subsurface scans may map entire ancient road systems beneath today's deserts. Each revelation redefines what civilization means and where its earliest forms may lie. History is not a closed timeline, but a realm of exploration. Humanity remembers and forgets in equal measure. Our greatest stories may persist not in stone, but in genes, symbols, and myths that survived longer than the cities that birthed them. Lost civilizations are not mere speculation. They are reminders of how much remains unseen, how much awaits rediscovery, and how incomplete our understanding still is.